May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Cornell.
Here.
Trustee Listner.
Here.
Trustee Miller.
Here.
Trustee Mulvaney.
Here.
Trustee Thomas.
Here.
Trustee Vree.
Here.
Are there any questions with respect to the minutes of our meeting of December 21st of the Committee of the Whole and the Village Board? If there are no questions with respect to the minutes, may I have a motion to approve the minutes? Second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Cornell.
Yes.
Trustee Listner.
Yes.
Trustee Miller.
Yes.
Trustee Mulvaney.
Yes.
Trustee Thomas.
Yes.
Trustee Vree.
Yes.
This is the time that we normally have comments, if any, from members of the public who would like to address us on matters not on the agenda.
How you doing? My name is Carlo Cavallero. I'm External Affairs at ComEd. The coincidence of tonight with the Green Region grant being on the consent agenda was too much. Tomorrow opens the grant period for this year, so I just wanted to stop by and say congratulations again, and thank you. And Sharon and Phil, you already have the application process for next year, so hopefully you can repeat the Powering Safe Communities. I got to double check whether Glencoe is a previous winner, because that one you cannot resubmit for. But I just wanted to say, like I said, the coincidence was too much to pass up. So congratulations again, and thanks for partnering with us on that.
Thank you, Carlo.
All right. Tonight at the Committee of the Whole, what we did is we went over and had an update on the Tudor Court design project and reviewed its progress and asked staff to continue working on it and to move on to the next steps. Trustee Vree, could you tell us a little bit about how we're doing financially?
Yeah. So the year continues. It's been another good year for the village. Generally, we've had slightly above expected revenues from notably sales taxes and permits. So a lot of construction and a lot of shopping. So that's been good for the village. We are also finishing up our annual CIP plan. It was a big year for capital improvements throughout the village, and that generally came in better than budgeted as well. So for the year, we're almost done, and it's been a good year for the village.
Thank you. Trustee Miller, do you have any comments on our Committee of the Whole discussion or on anything new with respect to the Plan Commission?
The Plan Commission has not met since our last meeting, and no, I think we're giving a good summary, and I hope everyone will continue to follow what we're doing on the report. There's a lot of interesting work there. So thank you to Tess. I don't know if they're still here, but thank you for a great presentation.
Trustee Thomas, tell us where we are with the Golf Advisory Committee.
Well, where we are is we haven't met since the last time, but we are meeting on January 29th, and we will be considering there will be a presentation on the rounds, revenue, and competition, so we can develop an overall plan and budget that will be on the agenda in March. I just think there are 2 or 3 things that are worth noting, however. The total rounds for this year were 33,232, which is the second highest total over the last 11 years. The total revenue through December was 1.8 million, which was 215,000 over budget. And we anticipate the year-end net operating income to be 280,000, which excludes capital expenditures of about 235,000, all which, of course, come out of that 280,000. So that it's been a very good year, and we continue to be able to plow most of whatever revenue we have on a net basis back into the course, which is what allows us to keep being successful.
Thank you.
Quick question for the golf committee, Dale. Do you guys project what you might be doing next year, and what's the capacity of the course? So how far are you to reaching sort of maximum utilization or maximum rounds?
We do consider what we think will be the usage and so forth, and the revenue from the course. Part of a big chunk of the revenue actually is through the sale, if you will, of guaranteed tee times on prime times on the weekend. And we already know that 96 or so % of the people who signed up last year are going to re-sign, and we've already sold the ones who won't re-sign, so, or we already will. So that already tells us a fair amount of usage of the course, especially on weekends. The rest of the usage, I mean, one of the things we will be considering on January 29th is we've been very successful, I think, in terms of our competition. Part of that is due to the fact that over the years, Dave Arden and Stella have so improved the drainage on our course that after a large rainstorm, we're able to operate, whereas our competitors are not. That condition has not changed. It is not likely to change in the next year. And in terms of maximum, no, we still have capacity. I mean, one of the problems we have with the current golf clubhouse is we really are at a severe disadvantage in terms of people who want to have a golf tournament, you know, be it a charity or some other group, and we really don't have the facilities for that. And for any golf operation, that often is an important source of revenue. And we do have times when we could do that, which are underutilized. And the other thing is, in terms of the golf clubhouse, today an awful lot of the revenue potential for golf courses is out of food operations. And, you know, ours are substandard in the sense that, you know, we don't have a lot of space to accommodate people, and the kitchen is inadequate. We do very well for what we have, but it's, you know, but no, the course can do still better, is the short answer.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Trustee Mulvaney, can you tell us a little bit about what's been going on with the Sustainability Task Force?
Sure. We did not meet this past month as a task force, but I will point out a few things that we've been doing. Of course, we're working towards our 2018 plan. Our next meeting is Tuesday next week, 7 o'clock, Village Hall. You got to be there, be square. And I want to point out also a thank you to the Anchor if they're here. Thank you, Anchor. They've agreed to do a monthly article, the first one this month, today, great, to advance the public awareness. Along those same lines, I think this month we're also sending out our little stickers I've talked about for the past several weeks. I think those are going to businesses real soon. I have been hearing a lot of positive feedback on our active transportation plan, which Adam is leading, and so thank you, Adam. It seems to be going very well with a lot of community engagement. Those are some of the highlights. So we've, one more thing I wanted to point out is that we've sent some folks from our task force to engage in some community solar meetings and learning about that. So it's one of our initiatives for 2018 is to help explore and understand opportunities for community solar systems. More to come. Our next meeting, as I said, next week, where we'll pin down more of our 2018 actions. That's my report.
Any questions? Thank you. Trustee Listener, could you tell us where we are in the Seswick Centennial Planning Group?
Sure. So Glencoe is celebrating its 150th anniversary next year in 2019. And so our working task force group has been getting together twice a month in anticipation of this. We have recently been reaching out to all of the different organizations that are active in Glencoe, the different community groups, because we would like them all to send a representative to a meeting that we're going to have on February 26th. We're kind of forming a committee of the whole group that will be, involved in the planning for Glencoe's 150th anniversary. We're really looking for a lot of the organizations to sponsor different types of activities over the course of 2019, and we think it'll be just a great opportunity for a lot of community participation, and it's going to be a very exciting, fun year for Glencoe. We're meeting again next Tuesday, so I'll have more to report at our next meeting.
Thank you, Gail. I have the manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. A few things this evening, one of which is always enjoyable, which is a swearing-in ceremony for a couple of our new public safety officers. I'm going to ask Director Lewandowski to come forward and introduce them to all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Mr. President, members of the board, it is my pleasure to introduce and welcome two new public safety officers, Hubert Zekin and Dylan Mahoney-Muno. In February 2017, the Public Safety Commission initiated an examination and hiring process for public safety officer. Hubert and Dylan placed on the eligibility list and were hired earlier this month. Based on what we've seen so far and their previous experience, we fully expect them to become competent and productive members of the department in a very short time. If you'll bear with me, I'd like to share a quick bio for each of them. Officer Zekin is joined tonight by his girlfriend, Julia Katseros. Where did she disappear to? She's back there. She's a Clarendon Hills police officer. So welcome and thank you for being here tonight. Hubert comes to us very well prepared for this job. He's a certified law enforcement officer with over 2 years of experience with the Posen Police Department, where he was a member of a major crimes task force prior to coming to Glencoe. His training and experience will accelerate his training progression to become a fully cross-trained public safety officer in Glencoe. He'll go through an abbreviated field training program prior to being released to solo patrol, likely in a few weeks. Hubert attended Lewis University and earned a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. During the pre-employment testing process, we were struck by Hubert's sincere public service orientation and his work ethic in preparation for this career. He possesses a high degree of motivation and self-discipline, all of which will serve him well as a public safety officer. We believe Hubert will be an excellent addition to the department, and we expect him to be a proactive officer and a fine representative of the department as well. Officer Mahoney-Muno is joined by his father, Bill, who was a battalion chief of the Evanston Evanston Fire Department. Also here tonight on Dylan's behalf are Chief Tom Burke from Northfield and Jeff Eaton and Ron Gannon from the Evanston Fire Department. We're proud to have you with us here tonight. Thank you. Dylan is a certified firefighter and paramedic. In fact, he's been working for us as a part-time paid-on-call firefighter since July. He'll graduate from the Cook County Sheriff's Police Academy in April, and once he graduates, he'll be a fully cross-trained public safety officer. Similar to Hubert, Dylan's training and experience will significantly reduce the time and cost required for us to train him to be fully functional. Dylan graduated from Michigan State University with an athletic training degree and worked in that field for a year before deciding to pursue his dream of working in the public safety field. Since he's been working for us, we've been impressed with Dylan's work ethic and service orientation. He has truly dedicated himself to this career. He's highly motivated, and he's been an excellent addition to our department so far. We look forward to preparing him for a long and rewarding career in public safety. Hubert and Dylan will be taking the Public Safety Officer Oath of Office this evening to fill existing and anticipated vacancies in accordance with the department's approved staffing level. Congratulations to each of you, and welcome to Glencoe. Mr. Crowley will administer the oath. I'll make it easier for you. You can read along. Or you can switch places for me too. So
You raise your right hand and repeat after me. We'll do them both together. I state your name.
I, Hubert Zekin,
Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
The Constitution of the State of Illinois.
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
And the ordinances of the Village of Glencoe.
and the ordinances of the Village of Glencoe,
And that I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the position of Public Safety Officer
the duties of the position of Public Safety Officer
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Welcome aboard. We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
On an opposite end of the spectrum, while he's not here this evening, we wanted to take a moment to recognize one of our retired Public Works employees. Bob Kalan has got a picture up there since he's not physically in the room tonight. On Monday, Bob Kalan retired after 33 years of service to the village. He immigrated to the United States from India in 1979 and began his employment with the Village of Glencoe Public Works Department in 1984. He served faithfully and capably as building custodian for 13 years here in the Village Hall and as a maintenance equipment operator for the last 20 years, where he worked primarily on garbage collection and water distribution. Bob's not here this evening because he and his wife have already relocated down to the St. Louis area to be near his daughter and grandson. I know that was very important to him as I saw him off last week. He's very excited about that. We wish him well in his retirement and are grateful to him for his long service to the village. Just a few miscellaneous updates I wanted to bring up this evening. Following some of the board's discussions last month regarding the Historic Preservation Commission, I had a good conversation with Commission Chair Tom Scheckelhoff, and we're working toward a joint discussion with the Village Board and the Commission, likely at the April Committee of the Whole meeting. Mr. Scheckelhoff indicated that the Commission would like to discuss several policy considerations with the Board, and will be providing a report in advance of that meeting. So we are working toward that. And also in response to the discussion last month regarding leaf blower regulations, staff will present a report to the Board and Committee of the Whole likely in March. So we can talk a bit more about that. A few more Committee of the Whole items that will be coming up. We have had some complaints regarding property maintenance that come up from time to time in the village, and more recently we've heard from residents about concerns at some of their neighboring properties. This is not a typical situation for us where we're dealing with property maintenance complaints, but they do come up from time to time. The village doesn't have ordinances or codes that regulate or provide a means to appropriately enforce property maintenance. And so staff is looking at possible code modifications with our legal counsel as well as our inspection contractor, HR Green, to determine possible code modifications that would provide the village with options to manage complaints such as these. We'll be bringing that to the Board in March at Committee of the Whole as well. And I just wanted to touch on lakefront construction. It's something that we talked about last year, and we are planning to continue some of the research that we've been doing to bring back that research to the Board in response to some of the comments and questions that we heard last time around. We'll probably be bringing that back to you in April, again, at the Committee of the Whole meeting. So a number of things on the docket for further discussion. And last but not least, we have last year in calendar 2017, we began the Business Before Hours events that I have spoken about before. We do have another one, our first of 2018, which is going to be next Tuesday, January 23rd. Staff, as you'll recall, invites the business community to these informal gatherings. It's a great opportunity to talk about issues that the business community sees. We'll be outlining a few things relative to upcoming items, one of which is the Sustainability Task Force work on the business, working with the business community and recognizing good sustainability practices, as well as we'll be having kind of a perennial conversation which relates to downtown parking, particularly relative to business employees and staff as we roll out our business licensing process again this year. So as I mentioned, an invitation was sent to all of our Glencoe businesses, and we're hoping for a good turnout. It's proven to be, I think, a really nice opportunity for staff and the business community to interact. So we'll do those quarterly, and as I mentioned, next week is the first one of this year. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, the first matter on the President's report is to report on the meeting that we had on fiscal year 2019 grants. We had our grant committee meeting. As you will know from the package, there have been a number of changes as a result of that. Senior Housing and Family Services grant has been merged together because Family Services has taken over administering the Senior Housing grant. and we left that the same for this year, which was their request, the combined grant. The North Shore Chamber Arts Ensemble did not request the $1,000 that they had gotten last year, so that we did not allocate any funds to or grants to them this year. The Glencoe Historic Society in their presentation talked about, as part of Sesquicentennial and other things, their activities with going in and reviewing, for example, the village archives and making copies and that. And pursuant to their requests, the recommendation of the committee was to add $1,500 to their grant to help offset some of the expenses that they were discussing with us. Also, Glencoe Youth Services has expanded a number of their programs, and after discussing, the grant committee is recommending to the board that we increase their grant by $1,000 this year. So the total community grants were increased by in terms of our recommendation by $1,500 from $87,000 to $88,500. Does anybody have any questions on the recommendations of the grant committee? If not, can I hear what our consensus is? Do we approve the recommendation so that we can include that in our budget discussions tonight? Yeah. Okay. Tonight, we're of course going to go over and discuss the 2019 budget, and if we adopt it, we'll add to an amendment to what we have in our thing to cover the grant committee. If we're able to do that this evening, when we get through listening to the presentation, if we approve the budget, then we won't need to have our February 1st meeting, and we'll use the committee of the whole meeting that we would normally have on February 1st to finish up finalizing the goals and hear from staff their recommendations for things that they should be doing pursuant to our strategic planning process, the continuation of the workshop that we had. I do want to mention that we have had two distinguished members of our community who have passed away in this past week. Milt Shader, who was a trustee in the 60s, and Roland Calhoun, who was both the trustee and then president of the village in the 60s, and who was a sort of a foundation member of the village of Glencoe and an example of Glencoe, and who always in our 4th of July programs used to ride his huge front wheel bike and that. And he's also a past president of the Park District. And so I did want to mention both of those gentlemen, that we mourn their passing this past week. Our next regular meeting, scheduled meeting for the board, will be March 15th. And with that, I would like to move to the consent agenda. Does anybody have any questions of items on the consent agenda? If not, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Cornell? Yes. Trustee Listner? Trustee Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Mulvaney? Yes. Trustee Thomas? Yes. Trustee Vree?
Yes.
Okay, our next order of business is consideration of an ordinance establishing an honorary landmark designation of the home at 228 Randolph Street as recommended by the Historic Preservation Commission. And it's my understanding that John Effler, that John's going to be telling us about that recommendation.
You can advance the slides? Okay, good. I'm John Eifler. I'm on the Historic Preservation Commission, and I'm here this evening seeking approval of a proposed honorary landmark designation for the Willard Wheeler House, which was designed by an architect by the name of Howard Bowen, which I didn't know of until this came through, but Howard Bowen designed 25 homes in Glencoe, and they're all really great places. So can we advance this, or do you advance this on? Here's the Willard Wheeler House in 1927. It's called Mediterranean Revival, and it's an interesting blend of Chicago common brick, Spanish terracotta tile roof, and little features like the Rococo columns that you see swirling up in front. It's very eclectic and very well done. And the owner and his wife have been doing a great job maintaining this wonderful home. Now Bowen, oh, there's another view of it. This is the view with this sun porch off to the side, very tight gables, location. Bowen also did some great buildings. The Wilmette Baptist Church is one of his, and then one of my all-time favorite is the chimneys in Winnetka. He evidently went to England to get the right kind of feel to come back and design the chimney. These could be a tavern on the ground floor before there was the Depression, which they had to close, unfortunately. So, anyway, the chimneys in Winnetka. So it meets all the criteria. There's a nice little rendering. It's also listed on the Field Guide of American Homes, the styles under this Mediterranean revival style. So it's a kind of textbook example of this style, which is why another reason why it's so important. And I believe, this is an important thing because we're going to be visiting this soon. We have two landmark statuses, honorary and certified. Honorary landmark is the one where you don't need the owner's consent, and it has no teeth, as they say. But there is a non-binding demolition review, and it does not qualify for any kind of tax freeze program to the state and IHPA, whereas the certified landmark is a much stronger protective measure that can be put over landmark buildings in Glencoe, and also qualifies, once it's a certified landmark, for tax freeze and other programs administered through the state. I believe you had a vote about this issue about a year ago, if you remember. But we really like to see things be certified landmarks, but they're protected, but we'll take honorary in this case. And as you know, we need to talk some more about these issues because we're losing a great Howard Van Doren Shaw house on Lake, and there's very little that can be done about this. So we've heard many people are upset about what's happening. Although the revenue of building permits is great, sometimes it doesn't work for us. So thank you. We'll say a few words.
Good evening.
Good evening, Dudley.
President Levin and Board of Trustees. My wife is here, Ann, could you stand? She's my partner in crime on this house, and have a little quick story to tell you. First of all, we're grateful for the nomination of our home as a Glencoe local honorary historic landmark. We wanted our home designated as a local historic landmark to preserve the home's history, to contribute to Glencoe's unique sense of place, to set an example of sustainable rehabilitation, and to receive recognition for making a positive contribution to the village. When it came time for us to relocate to the Glencoe area, we searched for a special home in our price range. It was a lengthy search, but we found the house that we wanted at 228 Randolph Street. It had good bones, but it needed significant work. We knew nothing of the architect, but the basic design was appealing. With squirrels in the attic and mice in the basement, we began the rehabilitation process. Our love for the house grew over time as we started rehabilitating the house and learned of its history, its previous occupants, and its architectural merit. With help from the Glencoe and Wilmette Historical Societies and the Glencoe Historic Preservation Commission, we learned that the architect Howard Bowen had designed several significant homes in the North Shore using historic revival styles from the 1920s. Now, 15 years later, we've completed our work, if that's ever possible for a 90-year-old house. We want to celebrate our work and share the fruits of our labor with the community. Rehabbing an older home is more sustainable than building a new home. Demolition should be the last option. This process was interesting, frustrating, expensive, time-consuming, educational, and at times even fun. With this award, we will be reminded of our role in preserving and contributing to Glencoe's heritage. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm open for any questions. If not, vote.
Thanks, Dudley.
Dudley, will you get, as president of the Park District, will you take that park, fix the Glencoe Road?
Glencoe Drive.
I'm still recovering from the house.
He plans to contribute the mice and the squirrels in the attic.
It's very generous.
All right. And if there are no other questions, may I have a motion, please?
Second.
May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee-
I expect Peter to vote for it because it's sustainable.
Trustee Cornell?
Absolutely.
Trustee Listener?
Yes.
Trustee Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Mulvaney? Yes. Trustee Thomas?
Yes.
Trustee Vree?
Yes.
Congratulations. All right. Our next order of business relates to items B through E on the agenda, which are 2 resolutions and 2 ordinances, 4 items total, relating to the budget. And let me read what they are, and then we'll discuss them as a whole, and when we get through, then we can vote on them as a whole. The first one, item B, is consideration of an ordinance adopting the annual budget of the Village of Glencoe for all corporate purposes for the fiscal year commencing March 1st, 2018, and ending February 28th, 2019. The next one, item C, is consideration of an ordinance amending the Village Code, Chapter 21A, Sewer Use and User Charge, and Chapter 36, Water, establishing authority to charge a fixed charge on utility bills. Item D is consideration of a resolution amending the comprehensive fee and fine schedule. And item C is consideration of a resolution authorizing withdrawal of Intergovernmental Risk Management Agency accumulated excess surplus funds in the amount of $125,000 for fiscal year 2019 Community Improvement Program projects. And we are fortunate, we have Sharon and we have Denise, who will go over, and David, who will go through the budget with us so that we can have any questions we have answered. Go for it.
Great. Thank you, and good evening, President Levin and members of the board. We're pleased this evening to present the fiscal year 2019 budget. The budget development process is really a multi-month endeavor where we take into account our needs related to infrastructure improvement, our operational goals and objectives for the coming year, our revenues, and balance those against our strategic priorities to come up with a spending plan for the community for the next year. So this evening we'll walk through a brief overview of what we've done this year and where we are headed next year. Okay. Fiscal year 2018 on the whole is projected to end with expenses substantially lower than initially budgeted. On a fund-by-fund level, however, within the general fund, we're projecting expenses to come in approximately $178,000 over budget. However, that's more than offset by revenues coming in stronger than expected at approximately $1.1 million, which is primarily due to sales tax receipts coming in stronger than expected, building permits, a partial year with a new revenue source from the general collection services fee that's applied to our garbage collection bills, and other revenues that are coming in stronger than we had budgeted. We achieved a number of important objectives for the community this year. I'll walk through just a few of them. There are numerous accomplishments, though, that the staff had achieved this year under the board's leadership. First, we retained our AAA bond rating from Standard & Poor's, which is an important designation for our community. We completed a number of major program outsourcing efforts related to garbage, 911 dispatch, and plan review and inspection services. When we presented this budget to you at this time last year, one of the things that we noted is that fiscal year 2018 was a hefty capital improvement year, and one of the largest areas of investment was $1.7 million in storm sewer improvement projects. We also completed a number of initiatives to help us better engage with residents and the business community throughout the year.
This brings us into fiscal year 2019. A quick budget summary we'd like to give you. The budget-to-budget comparison from fiscal year 2018 to fiscal year 2019 recommends an overall decrease across all funds of approximately $4 million, which reflects continued emphasis on cost containment while delivering high-quality services. The garbage and E91 funds have been eliminated, and expenses for both those funds have been shifted to the general fund. Included is a strategic planned drawn down of $1.3 million of general fund reserves to fund infrastructure improvement projects. Water rates, which we will discuss a bit later in the presentation, are increased to adequately fund water utility operations. And there continues to be an emphasis on infrastructure improvement needs and financing plans, including sustainability, technology and process improvement, customer service, and staff training.
All right. So drilling down a little bit more into what the differences are between fiscal year 2018's budget and fiscal year 2019, the chart before you illustrates just the difference in size and scale of the two budgets. A couple things that are interesting is, as we've mentioned, is that the 2018 budget is noticeably larger than the fiscal year 2019 budget. You'll see from the chart that there are a couple of shaded boxes that aren't shown on the fiscal year 2019 budget, and that's because, as we mentioned, the operations related to garbage collection and 911 services, some of the contractual services that we pay for in those areas have been rolled into the general fund after those services were outsourced. So what this shows is this red line is if we were to kind of overlay the total of the general fund and the garbage fund in fiscal year 2018, how that would stack up against our fiscal year 2019 general fund, and you can see that it is in fact lower than the combined expenses for those two funds in fiscal year 2018.
Revenues. The total recommended revenue across all funds is approximately $22.6 million. Sorry. Got it? There we go. Thank you. As mentioned, the total recommended revenue across all funds is approximately $22.6 million. Overall revenues are projected to increase 6.1% in the general fund from fiscal year 2018. Following extensive review by staff, revenue assumptions more accurately represent the average annual receipts. For example, building permits and sales tax, just to name a few. In addition, the one-time value of the sale of the village's garbage fleet is expected in fiscal year 2019. The water fund includes a 35% increase based primarily on a significant increase of water rates that we will discuss later. The MFT fund includes $227,000 based on the Illinois Municipal League estimates. The debt service fund includes the fiscal year 2019 levy for existing debt service at $2.1 million. A couple months ago, the recommendation of the Finance Committee was to levy the 2017 property taxes for debt service without abatement to allow for resources for future issuance of debt. As mentioned, general fund revenues are projected to increase 6.1% from fiscal year 2018. Major revenues expected to increase include approximately $1.3 million in building permit fees, an increase of $2.1 million in municipal sale and use tax. Property tax, as you can see, remains one of the largest revenue sources, accounting for over 50% of the total revenue collected each fiscal year. The 2017 property tax extension base will increase by 2% from the 2016 extended amount, which is equivalent to approximately $198,000. There are some major revenues that are expected to decrease that staff will keep a close eye on. State income tax is expected to decrease about 9.5%. Utility tax, roughly 12%, and personal property replacement tax has a decrease of about 1.8%. Yes, we will get to that. It should be. That's general fund.
Water, is the water revenue in this?
It is included. It is. Yes.
It's charges for service.
All charges for service.
Yeah.
Correct. The recommended budget includes the following fee increases, which were reviewed and discussed by the Finance Committee in November. Sewer charges, a 2.5% increase in quarterly consumption-based usage charge. Re-inspections, an increase from $50 to $100. This is when the village must conduct a re-inspection when a contractor is unprepared or needs to reschedule because the contractor fails to attend a scheduled inspection. Solicitor permit application fee increases to $30 plus a pass-through of the cost of fingerprint background check charged by the state of Illinois. Cross-connection control lock boxes increases from $25 to $100 for installation and annual maintenance. And then the water rate, implementing a fixed charge based on meter size and increasing the volumetric rate to $4.50 per 100 cubic feet. The recommended fiscal year 2019 expenditures totals $25 million, and that also is across all funds. The overall general fund operating expenditures have increased by 6.8%, primarily due to the transfer of employees from the garbage fund to the general fund, as well as equipment and other one-time purchases anticipated during the fiscal year. However, to mention budget to budget, when combining the previous year garbage fund and general fund and comparing total budget allocation for those services are reduced by about $551,000. Water fund expenditures are projected to increase, primarily due to the transfer of one staff member from the garbage fund to the water fund and other capital needs and equipment. Police pension funding has increased by 13.33% in line with the village actuary and state of Illinois requirements.
I apologize. It looks like we had a little bit of a glitch on our slide here. So I'm going to walk you through and decode the colors that are on here. I think we have a different version of PowerPoint installed here. My apologies. Heading into the department budget request, so if we were to go clockwise, that dark blue segment is the village manager's office, which is about $2.4 million or 19% of our spending request. Some of the things that the village manager's office is going to be focused on this year is continuing efforts related to information technology and training, as well as sesquicentennial celebration planning. A couple other things that are notably budgeted within the manager's office line items is that we aggregated our IT spending requests within the village manager's office. Some IT expenses were previously budgeted by department. This is nothing more than a housekeeping change to move them all under one roof. The Sustainability Task Force has funds that are budgeted within the manager's office along with funding for all of our other standing commissions. So next, moving clockwise, is the Finance Department at approximately $1.29 million or 7% of our spend. The Finance Department's budget, in addition to funding the day-to-day operations, has a couple of housekeeping changes that are reflected in this year's budget. Much like I mentioned with IT, there are some other village-wide purchases that are aggregated within a new purchasing division. Again, it's nothing more than a housekeeping change of moving those from other departments all under one roof. Our risk management expenses for our workers' compensation and general liability programs are also budgeted within the finance department. The light blue kind of lower right-hand portion of the wheel is our public safety department at 5.8 million, 5.8 million, or approximately 31% of our spend. The public safety department's budget has funds programmed for continuing our police and fire accreditation process, including developing and maintaining a combined police and fire policy manual that we intend to use a contractual service provider to help us develop. Also programmed in fiscal year 2019 in the public safety department is funding for a outsourced vendor to provide crossing guard services. We've mentioned in a couple of conversations previously that it's become increasingly difficult for us to recruit and retain crossing guards, and so fiscal year 2019 contemplates exploring alternatives so we can staff that important function. Last but certainly not least, the Public Safety Department's budget is largely comprised of personnel-related expenses, and what we did in this year's budget was do our very best to align the overtime budget with our projected needs for overtime. That brings us to the left side of the wheel, which is last and certainly not least, the Public Works Department. The Public Works Department is programmed at 9.2 million, or 49% of our spend. Some of the notable expenses in this year's budget are a full year of outsourced plan review and inspection services, a full year of contractual garbage collection services. One important thing to note is that while residents pay for their weekly collection services directly to our vendor, Lakeshore Recycling Systems, there are several community-wide programs, such as our now semi-annual cleanup day and some of our disposal costs and things of the like that the village pays for through the dollars that are programmed in the Public Works Department budget. Okay. And then that takes us to the Community Improvement Program.
The recommended budget includes $3.4 million across all funds in community improvement programs, which is aligned with the village's 10-year CIP and strategic work plan, and includes infrastructure, rolling stock, and equipment. Some of the largest categories of expenses represent sewer improvements, water main replacements, equipment, and IT systems. Also included with possible use of either fund balance reserves or some other alternative, or even the possibility of using IRMA access surplus includes the ERP and phase 1 of the village facility security upgrades.
Okay. Now we're going to head over to the water fund. The water fund is what provides funding for the operation of our water utility that produces and delivers drinking water to our residents and our businesses. The revenues for the water fund are projected at $2.75 million. As we had mentioned, there is a sizable increase that's programmed in this year's budget due to a water rate increase that we'll talk about in just a moment. The water utility is an enterprise, meaning that it operates using only those revenues that are derived from its rates. There's a smidge of revenue that we do realize from interest and from cellular towers that are placed on our water tower. However, it's a very negligible portion of our overall revenues. On the expenditure side, the water utility is projected at just under $2.1 million for fiscal year 2019, which is a 9.5% increase over last year. The primary drivers of this increase are the reallocation of one staff member in the Public Works Department from the garbage operations to the water distribution operation. So the cost of that employee's expenses are moved over to the water utility fund rather than previously being budgeted in the garbage fund. The water utility is also sharing a portion of the cost of purchase of a backhoe that's used in excavations and water main repairs. Okay. That brings us to the water rate. As we briefed the Finance Committee in November and December, the village began a water rate analysis over the summer to evaluate the sufficiency of the water rate to fund the operation of the water utility. And some of the things that we discovered is that when we take into account the infrastructure needs that we've determined that we have through the water distribution study that we completed in 2016, our rate as it exists today would not provide sufficient funding. Over the next 10 years, we anticipate $18.6 million in infrastructure needs that'll be programmed over that 10-year period. Over the last several years, the water utility has operated at a loss. Some of that has been strategic, though. For example, a $1.8 million drawdown of reserves in fiscal year 2014 to leave us with a projected year-end fund balance of about $515,000 at the end of the year. As I'd mentioned, we learned through the rate analysis that the rate as it exists today cannot fully fund all of our operation costs and the infrastructure needs. And what's led us to that is increases to the utility has experienced in its costs have been greater than the increases to its revenues through the rate. So again, that led us to evaluate different alternatives for the rate and bring a recommendation to the Finance Committee just a month or two ago. The rate that staff recommended to the Finance Committee and we're presenting to you this evening in the budget is an increase in the volumetric consumption rate and also a bit of a structural change in the rate. What we propose is in fiscal year 2019 implementing a fixed charge component of the bill that would be paid on a quarterly basis based on a customer's meter size. So a portion of the bill is going to be fixed, which provides revenue stability within the rate and within the utility. And a portion of the bill is based on the customer's consumption of water. That consumption charge will increase from $3.567 per 100 cubic feet to $4.50 per 100 cubic feet. Again, the fixed charge provides some revenue stability, and the volumetric charge recognizes the benefit that a customer may experience for conservation. So taking a look at how the rate may impact customers, we've projected kind of a low user, an average user, and a higher user customer with 1-inch meters. We selected 1-inch meters simply because the lion's share of our customers have 1-inch or 3/4 meters, which have the same quarterly fixed charge. So you can see that there is a varied impact to the customer based on their consumption. And again, the addition of a fixed charge is creates a different impact based on the customer's usage in terms of the percentage change that they may experience. So bringing us back up to high level, kind of recapping fiscal year 19, where we envision ourselves headed over the next year. Our strategic priorities and the value that we place on environmental sustainability are continuing to guide the work that we have planned over the next year. Some of the notable projects are, as we had mentioned, $3.45 million in community improvement program projects, which includes $615,000 of work in the water distribution system. That's just related to things like water main valves and the like. It's not any contemplation of funding related to rehabilitation or repair of the water treatment plant. It includes $950,000 in storm and sanitary sewer system projects, $200,000 in sidewalk repairs, replacement of critical frontline vehicles that are used in the public works and public safety departments, as well as purchase of a new enterprise resource planning system that's used organization-wide and is the backbone of our financial system. We have planned over the next year, as we do every year, a refresh of our 10-year CIP to continue our forward look, and along that, developing a companion 10-year debt financing plan so that we're evaluating how we may pay for these projects over the next 10 years and being proactive in our thinking related to funding. We plan to continue our efforts to review and align user rates and user fees with service delivery costs. So the most recent example of what we did is the water utility, where we evaluated the cost of the rate and the sufficiency of it to recuperate the costs of delivering the service. Some of the areas that we anticipate reviewing in more detail in fiscal year 19 include building permit fees, sewer charges, and some of our ancillary fees. We intend to complete the Tudor Court design analysis and present a recommendation to the village board. That'll continue with the work that has begun and the board discussed in the committee of the whole meeting this evening. As I had noted, we'll begin implementation of an enterprise resource planning software system. That project will likely span 2 years, but will get kicked off this year. Following outsourcing of some of our critical services related to garbage and recycling, plan review, inspections, and 911 dispatch, our efforts will be focused on managing those contractors to ensure that we're continuing to provide high quality and effective services to our residents. I had mentioned the update to our comprehensive police and fire policy manual in support of our periodic reaccreditation process, as well as sesquicentennial planning. We'll plan to continue developing new public communication tools and increasing utilization of our emergency alerts. Some of the other things that we didn't include on this slide that we'll focus on over the next year are staff training and development, so that we're continuing to maintain licenses and certifications for those staff who hold them, and also developing our employees' skills and ability to deliver high quality services to the residents. Sustainability will continue to be an area of focus over the coming year as something that's woven throughout these projects. And then to recap, as we had mentioned, the fiscal year 2019 budget is noticeably smaller than the fiscal year 2018 budget, largely related to the structural changes in garbage and E911, the reduction of 1 full-time employee in the Building and Zoning Division of the Public Works Department, and it also includes a strategic plan drawdown of $1.3 million in general fund reserves to fund infrastructure improvement projects. The water rate as proposed in the budget would increase to adequately fund the utilities operations, and we'll continue our emphasis on infrastructure improvement needs, training and development, technology, process improvement, customer service, and developing financing plans to accompany our community improvement program moving forward. With that, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions?
I do have a comment anyways, maybe not a question, but we're approving potentially a water rate for 1 year, and I feel like we should be just aware or acknowledge that we want to be doing this in the near future, to also revamp the structure again perhaps. And I would recommend that we look at this as a multi-year, like let's post for the next 3 years, our rates are going to be A, B, and C, right? As opposed to a single one-off. I felt like we needed to do it this year to just sort of catch up, and I think it's the right thing to do, but I just want to set that expectation that we're going to have to revisit the water rate again probably next year, would be my thought, and that when we do that, we provide some certainty in the future. So it's very typical to say, you know, over the next 3 years, these are going to be our rates, so that people can have an expectation.
I would think, Peter, that we will, once we get to March, having adopted this budget, continue the review of the water rates and how we are going to match them to our long-term capital needs and to paying for the entire cost of operating operations of the water department. So I would wholeheartedly agree. I think we need to look at this as a step that will go into effect in March, and that during the course of this year we need to continue to review where we really need to get to in order to accomplish all the goals of the board for our village.
Yeah, that's great. And I would maybe also suggest, I don't think we talked about having exceptions for special populations, seniors or whatever, or discounts on those rates, and that is more a discussion as we think about a multi-year rate. But I just want to make sure that for the record, you know, folks can anticipate that this is not the end of the water rate increase for a while. It's the beginning of a series of changes. There was one other comment I wanted to make, sorry. Oh yeah, just a curiosity. One number caught my attention which I don't recall talking about specifically, and that was the cost of our debt service. It was showing something around 8 or 9% on the slide. And I'm just curious about the typical, or do we have a benchmark by chance? Does anybody happen to know what is a typical percent of our of a municipality paying for debt service? Is carrying 8% on debt service typical? I mean, to me it seems it's just on the surface.
I think it's typical, if not low.
Yeah.
Of a majority of our neighboring communities. Certainly, I think our debt capacity is substantially higher than what we do carry, and we'll be retiring some debt at the end of this coming fiscal year, and so that will open up a bit more of debt capacity into the future. So I would say that it is low, and that's a good thing. I think that ties back to the responsible nature that this community has embodied for many years, which is when we bring referenda questions to the community, they're for appropriate purposes and they're within a appropriate spending plan. That all being said, we do have a pretty substantial CIP that we're looking at in the next 10 to 20 years, and so having a low debt capacity right now is a good thing as we approach that.
I think so. Yeah, I was just curious if we knew what the some benchmark point, but
I don't off the top of my head.
And
we can search that.
If you recall, when we were looking at the long-term CIP and how we might stage it in different types of debt, and as we'll be looking at in the future, one of the things that David did on the graph for us was to put a line that showed where our normal debt level would be when we're funding all of our capital projects. And for many years, we've had a goal of not exceeding that line, and we're substantially below that now and about to retire some debt that will take us even further below. So as we look at how we're going to fund and what water rates are and everything in terms of capital projects, that will be one of the things that we'll be looking at as benchmarkings and discussing where we fit. So those are very logical and thoughtful questions.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? I think I know most of the answer based on the Finance Committee meetings, but as I recall, and I won't have these figures exact, but we show revenues of like 22.6 million or something, and expenditures of about 25 million, if my recollection is correct. And we're covering that gap, at least in part, by the $1.3 million drawdown from the general reserve. We're also covering part of it from the Irma excess that we're. What's the other part that
the resources within the bond fund? Those were the funds.
That's what I was trying to do.
Yep. Okay.
And that is a good point. And one thing, if I could just elaborate on it, is just a refresh on our practice that has been to accumulate those general fund reserves. When we mentioned the strategic drawdown of those reserves, we're essentially putting money in the bank to save up for those projects. And then when we've got the money accumulated and it's time to do that project, we're using that money that we've saved. So it is not a structural issue within the budget.
Yeah, in fact, we've well exceeded, I think, the guideline that the Finance Committee agreed should be our sort of base. So that's precisely the point, is we do have the flexibility.
Correct.
I did have one other thought here I meant to raise, and that was around the crossing guards. I don't know if we have put effort into recruiting volunteers from the community. It sounds like we probably have.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know many details on how hard we pushed there, and also the responsibility of crossing guards. I'm presuming that we've assumed that as the village. Is there any cost share with the school to provide crossing guards, and how did we engage the community to try and offset the need for that cost? It seems like a pretty significant need here, and using, I just think it's I guess I don't know much about how we tried to solve this other than that's subcontracted out.
Yeah, this is a service we've provided for generations, and we're finding it, and this is not just in Glencoe, this is true everywhere. Getting people to stand out in the rain for an hour and a half in the morning and an hour and a half in the afternoon doesn't sound that difficult until you actually ask for people to raise their hands, whether you're paying them or not. We did outreach with the school district a couple of times this year where flyers were actually sent home as part of their weekly distribution to parents, asking for people to either get paid to be a crossing guard or to volunteer to do so. We got one individual who's actually a part-time staff member in District 35 who took us up on that. We've done that a few times. Our recruitment efforts have continued to be difficult in terms of just finding qualified candidates. We did a major push on a recruitment website. We got a couple 300 applications, from which I think we actually generated one interview and did not offer that individual the position. It is a complicated role to fill. Right now, it is being filled primarily with the crossing guards that we still have on staff, part-time employees, and the overflow is being filled by community service officers and, in some cases, public safety officers, pulling them off the street in order to have them there. We have had conversations with District 35. District 35 has indicated a willingness to help pay for the delta between what we have historically budgeted for this purpose and what the new cost would be. And Catherine Wang and I actually had a conversation about that this week. Their board talked about it at their meeting last week, and I think we'll be able to, at least for this first year, get some buy-in from District 35, and then we would take a look at it again to see if there perhaps could be even further partnership between the district and the village. So there are ongoing conversations with them on that front. For the very purpose that you've articulated, that it's not an insubstantial cost, and we want to see if we can kind of share in that.
Well, that's great, and thank you. And one possible suggestion here is to also engage in that active transportation process as they're thinking about safe routes to schools and what that might mean to the need for crossing guards, increase or decreasing that need. We have a lot of kids who are being driven. Maybe we can shift that, and anyways, it's a
great point.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions? Thank you, Sharon and Denise, for your excellent presentation. If there are no other questions, may I have a motion to adopt on an omnibus vote? Now, there's one vote on the 4 measures that I read, the 2 ordinances and the 2 resolutions, with the amendment that we add to that the changes recommended by the grant committee.
Second.
May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Cornell? Yes. Trustee Listner? Trustee Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Mulvaney? Trustee Thomas? Yes. Trustee Vree?
Yes.
Thank you. Our next order of business is consideration of an ordinance amending the Village of Glencoe's Village Code concerning solicitation, secondhand stores, and itinerant merchants. And Deputy Director of Public Safety, Rich Weiner, will make a presentation and explain what we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. President, Village Manager Crowley, and board members for your time this evening. Currently, our ordinance requires only commercial solicitors they're required to get a permit. And in so, many times what they do is they have sometimes 20, 30 people that they hire, usually through a third party. So controlling that numbers is very difficult. So then there's a great deal of staff time spent trying to vet these people, get them identification, and then by the time it comes to giving their permits, usually about 75% of them don't show up for it. And we're only billing the commercial vendor, not the individual permit holders. So we're losing some revenue that way. Then we do not require religious organizations, not-for-profits, and under 17. So what we're requesting of the board to consider is to make it an across the board, everybody who's going to solicit in Glencoe to required to get a permit. The other thing we're doing is, since we don't find criminal history information, we just ask them if they've ever been convicted of a crime concerning permit violations and such, so they're basically doing it on their word. And usually it's the employer and not the employee. One employer will come out and they'll fill out 30 applications for all their employees, so we're not even seeing them face to face to find this out. They'll submit a little picture and the application pre-filled out by them, submit it, we do all the work, and then they're out there and they're soliciting. And when we do get a complaint, we sometimes can't figure out who was the person that they're complaining about. We call the company, and they say, well, no, it's our third-party vendor who actually hires everybody. We contact them, and they say, no, it's that. So we wind up not finding out who it is, and we're running around chasing our tails. So we're asking to do it and across the board. Everybody has to do it. The second thing we're asking is about criminal history background checks. We're going to do the fingerprinting. That way, they come in, they see us, and we're going to get the fingerprints, and then we're going to know if they've had previous violations as the ordinance requires. If they have, they've been in violation, they won't get a permit. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what we're asking you to consider in amending this ordinance for us tonight.
I have just one question.
Yes, sir.
Would this lump in like Girl Scouts selling cookies and?
Yes, we can't separate. Once we ask for a permit, that's it. But usually where we see the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts is actually in the business storefront area, and that's free reign area. That's not, we're talking the door-to-door, the commercial, the not-for-profit, so that everybody, it's more the door-to-door where we're having our issues, and we're not actively going out looking for, okay, where are the Girl Scouts, where are the Boy Scouts? This is usually in response to complaints against, some of the tactics that are being used in soliciting today.
It's a tough problem.
It is. You're absolutely right.
You're lumping those who I would certainly not want to have to permit with those who I certainly would like to have permitted. And I guess, do we have a sense of the numbers of these things?
Yeah, it's been increasing. It's been increasing more and more and more. We're finding a lot of aggressive tactics and fraudulent activity where we're sometimes getting this information weeks after the solicitation is stopped. So we're trying to do background and figure out who the person is. They're signing people up for services that they didn't ask for. So we're trying to go back, and we really have nobody we can go to and hold accountable for this activity. We tell them, so then what we do is we then wind up revoking their permit.
Is there a way to separate by age?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I mean, a 12-year-old is different from a 17-year-old.
It seems to me that if you're talking about 12-year-old or whatever, but having to get a permit itself may not be that off-putting, but having to get fingerprinted and everything, it seems to me to be almost terrifying in some cases.
I can understand that concern. In talking over with our attorneys, they found it difficult to say that we can start selecting certain people need it, certain people don't, because then it can sound discriminatory. I mean, the idea is we're not going to go out and promote, okay, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, 12 years old, you have to come in and get fingerprinted.
I understand the concern. It's just,
why not like a legal working age? Like, it would only make sense if you're soliciting on employment. Wouldn't it be a legal working age limit to have to do that?
There's a problem when you begin to do age, because quite often some of the solicitors and problems are people that are college age, high school age. There are lots of different facets to it, and my understanding from the attorneys is you can't sort that out. That doesn't mean we have to be aggressive in terms of worrying about Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. But if we're going to control the overall problem that we and many communities around us are having, we do have to.
Really problematic. You said you're going to put an ordinance in and not be either going to do it or don't.
Yeah.
Well, I assume that if they go beyond the downtown, they'll come in.
Well, the idea is there's also discretionary law enforcement powers, and we actually act on that every single day we're out there. Do we write every single ticket we stop?
Yeah.
I'm still struck. Yeah, right. And I'm still struck with the age issue. I just can't believe that we can't do that.
Is that coming from Holland and Knight?
No, I mean, the general concept is one that the village wanted. We put in, this ordinance is drafted based on forms that we have put together for other of our towns.
The question on it, can you have, like, you need a permit if you're over age 10 or 12? You're saying there's some legal counsel that we can't make that? Is that coming from Holland and Knight, or is that another council?
Well, we've reviewed this, and we worked with your staff to put it in. I mean, we base it on a desire of where the village wants to be.
It sounded a little bit like that was a desire to avoid a discriminatory perception.
I believe that's
not a legal requirement, but rather we were advised that we want to avoid looking like we're discriminating by age or by anything. Right. And it may be legally allowed to put an age limit, but that would give potentially the appearance of discrimination, right? Is that the idea? Yes.
We're saying it's okay.
Right.
It's a very common way to regulate. Many of our towns do exactly the same thing.
Do exactly what thing?
We do it exactly the way this ordinance is drafted, and have an age.
This does not have an age.
I mean, well, no, the way that this ordinance is drafted as it is set forth.
Correct.
As we have drafted as it appears before you. It is based on forms that we have created for other of our municipalities. So if they have desired to have an age base, if other municipalities have, and there are, that do have age provisions in there, we have put them in. For Glencoe, we have taken them out, and that's commonplace on the North Shore.
Okay, Kerry?
Can I just clarify one thing, and Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think, Barbara, you mentioned the fear of children getting fingerprinted. We wouldn't fingerprint anyone under 17 years of age because they wouldn't have a criminal history by fingerprints anyway, if that's one of your concerns.
That was one of my concerns.
You are correct. Under the Juvenile Act, they would not have.
Okay.
I think we should fingerprint a bunch of 9-year-olds.
You correctly stated it's not a legal requirement, but it is a preference in various different municipalities. This ordinance is drafted in a very common way.
Okay.
So just refresh my memory again. So if a Girl Scouter wants to go sell cookies and they want to follow the procedure, what is that procedure then for that child?
They come in and file the application, and like Director Lewandowski said, under 17 won't be fingerprinted, but we'll get a photo because they'll have a photo ID, they'll fill out all the paperwork, and then they'll get a permit.
And they'll pay a fee?
Yes.
And what was that fee again?
Well, the permit fee itself is $30. Then we're having a pass-through portion, which is what the state is requiring us anytime we do a fingerprint. So if we're not fingerprinting, it's $30.
It's the 30. See, what bothers me is I think we're all uncomfortable with this. I'm getting that sense. I'm concerned that the community will be uncomfortable with it too. I'm just wondering what other alternatives there are to kind of achieve the goal that we all have, that we don't want annoying solicitors walking through Glencoe who could be doing fraud and things like that. Just wonder if there's a better way to serve that goal and not start impacting, Girl Scout cookies and children doing, some little fundraising, the types of things that children do.
It seems like there is a legal way simply to put some kind of discriminatory, if that's the right word, discrimination on, an age by suggesting we don't require this permit until you're of working age, or whatever it might be, 17, 13.
If we could, I'd like to ask if the board would consider holding this and tabling it. I'd like to circle back with legal counsel on a couple of questions that I have before we ask you to vote on this and bring this back at a later time.
Yeah, one more quick thought I just had is could it be that Glencoe residents are exempted from this? And if you're an out of Glencoe residents, then you know.
I don't know that that solves the problem. That might create.
But there may be another way, as the village manager and I just discussed, there may be another way to approach this.
Yeah.
I would think we could take this up in March.
And I have no problem with taking it up in March. That's from a legal perspective. And I think that we may be able to address many of the concerns that were raised at the dais tonight.
The other thing in terms of age is that's one of the considerations. I was a Boy Scout, but my recollection is by the time you, in Boy Scouts for example, by the time you get into high school, you tend, if you're going to keep it up, you're usually going into Explorers or something else. I can't remember what the Girl Scouts program is in terms of ages, but my guess is that there's there's probably sort of a cutoff somewhere before or in high school where for most girls who actually be selling Girl Scout cookies. So you could use that if I'm right about that, as an age demarcation.
Well, I think the other relevant part of the age demarcation is where are we getting the problems? So I know that you've said, that some of these problematic solicitors are 17. I mean, maybe we can find out what are the youngest of them, how old are they, and that may work as a cutoff for Scouts.
The problem may be that if it's, if you make it in effect whatever age most 11th graders are, you'll have solicitors from outside getting people of that age.
I think we should wait till March and have staff talk to our attorneys about how we handle all of the substantive problems, because there may be age issues if you exempt 17 or something like that, but there may be quite different ways to approach each of these pieces, and I want to make sure that they've been explored so that when we get it back, we're able to feel comfortable with what we're going to vote on. So I think that's the better way to approach it.
Thanks, Jonathan, for raising it, and I do think it's an important safety issue. So we're trying to. I think, speaking for the board, we all want to resolve this potential issue here. Just this may not be the right language at the moment.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, and I wonder too, is that enough of a fee to get what you guys? Maybe that's something else to wrap in.
It could be. We're trying to consider all the staff time that's spent, processing the application, doing the background checks, printing everything out, getting it all ready, phone calls and stuff.
One thing about the fee, though, I mean, that's an expense, but this, I mean, when I did it as a kid, it was to raise money for the YMCA. I mean, it was, to charge $50 a kid to go raise money for.
But you got to remember the bulk of these permits, I don't think are kids.
Well, that's where it's like maybe there could be, if it's a nonprofit, it's waived. You still have to get a permit, but maybe you waive the fee. Or I don't want to put more work on you, but
no, that's what we're going to look at. We've got to explore the differentiation.
You got a kid who's 16 or 15, 14. They can set up a table downtown, and then it's exempt. I think we're concerned if a kid's 8 or 9, they're walking around selling. At a certain point, I then look at the public safety concern, the waste of the resources of public safety, because that's where the bulk of the people are. And I know we're like the Girl Scouts, and it's, we all have sympathy for that, but I doubt that's really a big issue here at all.
Right. And that's why I think we got to go back, look at our substance of what we've said, take a good look at what are the best ways to do that, not waste their time, and to do something that we think the public will be comfortable
with some real thought in that process of, is $30 enough for the amount of time that sounds like it's being spent of taking, any time that goes into the public safety, that can go into overtime. I mean, that's huge amounts of money. For what?
Yep.
People knocking on my door?
Agreed.
Okay. And I think a component of this also is the public information campaign of put a sign on your door that says no solicitors invited and nobody's knocking on your door, if that's the case, because that's an ordinance violation at that point. So
I just don't answer.
Well, I think that's a good rule of thumb.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All righty.
Take that up in March.
The next order of business is, may I have a motion to convene in closed session for the purpose of discussing performance of employees pursuant to Open Meetings Act, Section 2C1.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Cornell?
Yes.
Trustee Listener?
Yes.
Trustee Miller?
Yes.
Trustee Mulvaney?
Yes.
Trustee Thomas? Yes. Trustee Vree?
Yes.